At first, it looked like a routine inspection. A single container. A Tuesday morning. A seal that matched every automated checkpoint in the system. Within 48 hours, that one container had triggered the largest fentanyl precursor seizure in the history of the Port of Long Beach, and the beginning of the end for a criminal supply chain that had been moving invisibly through one of the busiest cargo terminals on the planet for nearly a decade. This is the story of how it happened. And more importantly, how it was allowed to happen for so long. It was 6:14 in the morning when U.S. Customs and Border Protection Officer Diana Reyes pulled container PCLU-4471923 from the secondary review queue at the Port of Long Beach in California. Diana had been on the overnight cargo screening team for 9 years. She had personally processed more than 60,000 container inspections across her career. She knew the physical language of how commercial pharmaceutical import containers were supposed to look. Container PCLU-4471923 had cleared every automated checkpoint the port system was designed to run. The radiation portal monitor returned clean. The density scan matched the declared contents: sodium carbonate and magnesium stearate, standard pharmaceutical excipient materials destined for a licensed manufacturing facility in San Bernardino County. The commercial invoice was complete. The seal number matched the international shipping database. Diana pulled the container anyway. Not because the system told her to. The system told her the exact opposite. She pulled it because of the seal itself. The number was right. The color coding matched the carrier's format. But the surface texture of the plastic casing around the seal wire was slightly different from the other containers in the same shipment. Not dramatically different, not in a way that would appear in any photograph, just different. A micro variation in the way the plastic had aged, something that didn't belong to the same manufacturing batch as the other seals on the other containers moving through that terminal that morning. Diana had seen something like it once before, 7 years earlier at Los Angeles. That container had held 16 kilograms of methamphetamine beneath a false floor panel. She filed a manual secondary inspection request at 6:22 a.m. It was approved at 6:41 a.m. At 7:09 a.m., the container moved to the secondary inspection bay. What Diana and her team found inside changed the scope of everything. The top layer matched the manifest exactly. Palletized drums of pharmaceutical-grade sodium carbonate, sealed and labeled down to the lot numbers. But below the top layer, the floor of the container was not the floor of the container. It was a false deck, precision engineered to distribute weight evenly so that any density analysis would return results, consistent with a fully loaded standard cargo floor. The engineering was not improvised. It had been designed with a level of precision that indicated significant resources in planning. Beneath the false deck, agents found 4 sealed internal chambers. Chamber 1, approximately 340 kilograms of ephedrine hydrochloride, a controlled fentanyl precursor regulated under the Chemical Diversion and Trafficking Act, vacuum sealed with falsified certificates of analysis bearing the name of a legitimate supplier in Guangdong Province, China. Chamber 2, approximately 280 kilograms of acetic anhydride, a regulated precursor used in the synthesis of heroin and synthetic opioid compounds. Chamber 3, approximately 190 kilograms of pre-synthesized fentanyl analog, not a precursor, but finished product packaged in counterfeit prescription medication format. Chamber 4, $240,000 in U.S. currency, and a set of internal routing documents in both Mandarin and English. Diana filed an immediate federal alert at 7:44 a.m. By 9 a.m., the DEA's Los Angeles Field Division and Homeland Security Investigations had taken control of the scene. The vessel that had carried the container, a cargo ship under Panamanian flag on a trans-Pacific route from Shanghai, was held at anchor pending federal review. But what investigators did not yet know was that the container Diana had pulled was not an isolated incident. It was the most recent delivery in a supply chain that had been operating continuously for 8 years. By 11:30 a.m., investigators had begun a joint operational review of every pharmaceutical and industrial chemical import that had cleared Long Beach's automated inspection system over the previous 8 years. The container had been imported under a California-registered company called Pacific Rim Pharmaceutical Distributors, LLC, a licensed wholesale pharmaceutical excipient supplier on paper with a DEA chemical handler registration, a legitimate appearing website, and a commercial address in Torrance. Its registration date, 8 years and 3 months before Diana's inspection, Analysts identified 214 individual shipments linked to the company across that window. Of those, 186 had cleared automated inspection without secondary review. The remaining 28 had been flagged for secondary review and had cleared secondary review without incident. But officers quickly noticed something unusual about those 28 secondary clearances. Every single one had been processed through the same internal authorization pathway inside Long Beach's Federal Cargo Inspection Management System, and everyone carried the same code, CBPDIR-07. That code did not belong to a field inspector. It did not belong to a shift supervisor or a regional compliance officer. CBPDIR-07 was a port director level authorization, reserved exclusively for the Director of Customs Operations at Long Beach's International Cargo Terminal. The director was a man named Raymond Castillo, 59 years old, 23-year veteran of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, promoted to Director of Customs Operations at Long Beach 7 years earlier, 2 CBP Commissioner's Awards for Operational Excellence. His authorization code appeared on every one of the 28 clearances that had allowed Pacific Rim's shipments to pass through without further inspection. Investigators began tracing the financial chain. The payments did not move into Castillo's accounts directly. They flowed through 17 shell companies registered across California, Nevada, Delaware, and the Cayman Islands, names chosen to sound unremarkable. Western Pacific Logistics Consulting LLC, Southwest Commercial Compliance Group, Pacific Basin Trade Advisory Services. But the financial architecture was too sophisticated for a port director to have designed alone. Someone with very specific expertise had built this. At 2:17 p.m., FBI cyber analysts traced the encrypted communications channel to a private server registered to a regulatory consulting firm called Meridian Cargo Compliance Partners LLC, operating out of a commercial suite in Irvine, California. No federal contractor registration, no GSA listing, no public web presence. But it had filed corporate paperwork in Delaware 8 years and 1 month before Diana's inspection, 2 months before Pacific Rim had filed its own registration. The registered agent was a name that returned a federal employment record within minutes. Carol Ann Whitmore, 63 years old. Former Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Field Operations at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Before that, 12 years as a senior policy analyst at the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Trade, specializing in commercial cargo screening protocol design for pharmaceutical and chemical imports. Before that, 11 years as a CBP field operations officer at the Port of Long Beach. She had served on the internal CBP review committee that established the automated inspection threshold parameters for pharmaceutical excipient imports in 2009. She had personally written the guidance document that defined which chemical compounds required enhanced secondary screening and which could clear on automated documentation review alone. That guidance document was still in active use at Long Beach the morning Diana noticed the wrong seal. Whitmore had retired from federal service 8 years and 4 months before that morning. Within 60 days of her retirement, Meridian Cargo Compliance Partners was registered in Delaware. Within 30 days after that, Pacific Rim Pharmaceutical Distributors was registered in California. The operation had been designed before she left her desk. Inside the encrypted archive investigators extracted from the Irvine office network, her codename was the Coordinator. A message dated approximately 3 years into the operation read, "Automated systems flag anomalies. They do not flag the absence of anomalies. We are not hiding from the system. We are being normal. Normal clears every time." Raymond Castillo had provided the authorization codes. Carol Ann Whitmore had built the system that made every authorization invisible. At 4:44 p.m., a federal judge in the Central District of California signed simultaneous search and arrest warrants for 16 locations across Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. At 5:12 p.m., the order went out. Execute. At the Port of Long Beach's Federal Cargo Operations Building, Castallo was in his director's office when agents entered. He was detained without resistance. Inside, agents recovered 3 desktop computers, an external hard drive concealed inside a hollowed-out copy of the CBP Import Operations Manual, printed cargo authorization logs with handwritten reference notations, and approximately $94,000 in cash in a locked drawer at Castillo's residence in Palos Verdes Estates. Agents recovered 4 burner phones, a home office laptop with an active, encrypted session, and a floor safe containing approximately $780,000 in cash, 11 gold bars, and offshore banking documentation tied to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Belize, and Singapore. At Meridian Cargo Compliance Partners in Irvine, Whitmore was inside the office when agents arrived. A document shredder was running. Behind a built-in cabinet in a back office, agents found a rack-mounted server, running, active, and transmitting. Cyber analysts suspended the transmission and began extraction immediately. Whitmore did not resist arrest. At the Pacific Rim warehouse in Torrance, DEA agents led entry. Behind a secured partition, not listed on any business registration filing, they found a climate-controlled storage area containing approximately 1.2 metric tons of controlled precursor chemicals and finished counterfeit pharmaceutical product ready for street-level distribution. The DEA's preliminary street value estimate for the seized finished product alone, $340 million. At Whitmore's residence in Newport Beach, agents found a concealed server behind a built-in bookcase, backup drives spanning the full 8 years of the operation, a wall safe containing approximately $560,000 in cash, and a floor compartment holding 7 foreign passports, 4 in different names. 11 additional locations were executed simultaneously, registered addresses of 14 shell companies, executive residences, a private aviation fuel operation used for high-value cash transfers, and 2 financial intermediary offices identified in the payment routing structure. By 11 p.m., analysts had completed their first full pass through the recovered server data. The operation had a name inside the archive, the Pacific Ledger. It contained the complete operational architecture, an 8-year import schedule covering all 214 shipments, authorization records for every secondary clearance, the corporate ownership map of all 17 shell companies, and a detailed accounting of financial proceeds allocated to each participant. Total estimated value of controlled precursors and finished synthetic opioid product moved through Long Beach under the Pacific Ledger, approximately $3.1 billion at wholesale. The street distribution value of finished fentanyl analog that had already reached U.S. distribution channels before the operation was disrupted, estimated between $8 and $12 billion. 44 individuals were in federal custody by 2:30 a.m. Assets frozen domestically, $340 million. Offshore accounts flagged through international cooperation, an estimated additional $290 million under active legal recovery. Long Beach's director-level cargo authorization pathway was suspended immediately. A complete architectural review of secondary clearance override protocols was announced across all major U.S. container ports within 72 hours. The detail that stayed with investigators after the arrests was not the scale of the money. It was the gap in the seal verification protocol. Diana Reyes had noticed a micro-variation in the surface texture of a cargo seal that no automated system was designed to detect and that no formal checklist required a field officer to examine. The port's official secondary inspection protocol checked seal numbers, radiation readings, density scans, manifests, and commercial invoices. It did not include physical seal material consistency checks. That gap had been identified in an internal CBP operational review 11 years before Diana's inspection. The author of the recommendation to close it was Carol Ann Whitmore. The recommendation had been submitted, reviewed, and quietly set aside during a period of budget restructuring. Whitmore retired 3 years later. She then spent the next 8 years building an import operation specifically designed to exploit the exact gap she had once tried to close. Diana Reyes returned to work 4 days after the raids. The detail she had acted on, the texture of a seal casing, was not on any checklist. It was not part of any training module. It was 9 years of accumulated pattern recognition operating at a level no automated system had been built to replicate. The 800 kilograms Diana pulled from that container on a Tuesday morning represented one shipment out of 214. 213 had already cleared. Their contents had already reached distribution networks across the American Southwest. If a supply chain this large, moving $3.1 billion in fentanyl precursors and finished synthetic opioids through one of the most carefully monitored cargo terminals in the United States, could operate invisibly for 8 years because a single protocol gap in a seal verification checklist had been recommended for closure, reviewed, and shelved. How many other containers are clearing that same terminal tonight? With a seal that looks exactly right,